Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Just waiting for Mark to join the webinar as well, and then we'll get started. See, obviously, people are signing in, which is great, and we'll go from there. Right.
I found a button.
That's fine. No worries. We're in. So good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us for the webinar today. Obviously, we'll be covering off what's been sort of said this afternoon in terms of key topics that have come up, and also maybe some of the stuff that wasn't said, which has already come out in some of the detail that we've sort of absorbed this afternoon as well since the Chancellor finished her statement. Hopefully everybody knows myself and Mark, so thanks for joining us. Just like a little bit of housekeeping type stuff. We do want this to be interactive, so if you've got questions, you'll find the chat box should be on the bottom sort of menu, or the Q&A. As we go through it, feel free to drop any comments, any questions, etc. that you've got in there, and we'll try and pick them up into the conversation as we sort of go through some of the topics. No such thing as a silly question. We'll help where we can. Obviously, there are some bits that in terms of detail that's still to come. So if you can keep an eye on our socials, posts, emails that we'll get out to you as well, as that sort of becomes available to us. So I'm going to kick off, Mark. I'm going to, we always enjoy your view on how you found that. So I'll hand over to you.
For those of you that have joined us before on these things, you always know that I'm the misery. So I'm going to start with a little bit of misery. The reality is, we've seen this before, haven't we? Every time there's an election, the first budget after the election, there's always tax increases. There always is, every time, because you can always blame the ones, the government that was preceded you. I've seen enough of these now, and I've seen enough of these with the Labour government. We're back into tax and spend, folks. I love the comment that the Chancellor made that we want to end austerity. That's great. And what always happens is we borrow huge amounts of money, and then the next government that comes in has to try and balance the books and get the borrowings down. So we have austerity. So we have a tax and spend, and then we have to rein back spending. So just on that point, just to say, the £40 billion worth of tax increases is huge by any standard. And borrowings are already starting to hit record levels. So September's borrowings was the third highest September borrowing level since 1963. Our current national debt is at 98.5% of our economic output. And what has the Chancellor done? Well, she's rewritten the rules of what does debt mean. Now, I think most of us know what debt is, but she's rewritten the rules. Therefore, you can borrow more, which is, hey, good news. So we're going to be talking about taxes a lot. Of course we are. We're accountants. We're going to talk about tax. There's always an opportunity when there's public spending going on, where there's huge amounts of money being spent on infrastructure, new hospitals, schools, whatever. There's opportunities for us as business people to make money. So as much as we're going to be slightly less than happy about our taxes, I think that's realistic. We're going to be less than happy. There's plenty of opportunity out there, folks. Let's not be despondent. I think the underlying principle of all of these things, you've always heard me say, and Daniel, we thrive and survive despite our government, and we're going to continue to do so. So survive and thrive despite the government.
Yeah, and I think that's a really, really important point, isn't it? Because there's obviously been, like with all of these, there's always lots of speculation that goes beforehand in terms of what's going to be said.
Yep.
I think we've had a year of like stop-start with business and stuff because of the uncertainty, I guess, really in terms of what direction that people were going to go on. But I think what gets proved over and over again is people's ability to pivot and adjust for it.
Yep.
It is the strength in it, isn't it? Like in terms of we can't control what they're going to announce at this level, but we can control our reaction to it and what we do.
We're entrepreneurs. Everyone listening to this is an entrepreneur. I doubt very much that we've got other people other than entrepreneurs listening to us. Why are we entrepreneurs? Because we will pivot. We will move. We will react to the environment we've got. And if there's things we don't like, we'll just move away from them a little bit and just be aware of them. And we just run our business and survive and thrive despite the government. So, yeah, that's what we're going to have to do. So where we talk about taxes, and we will be talking about £40 billion worth of increases in taxes, folks. Don't be despondent. It's just business. It's what we do. And we're just going to cope with this. What I didn't tell Daniel I was going to say, so I'm going to throw this one in, Dan. Sorry, as you can imagine, we've had a busy old day. We've got a busy evening in front of us as well. The OBR has decreased the growth forecast and the Office for Business Responsibility, and they have increased the inflation forecast compared to what they had said before. Now, the IMF have had different numbers. Just a quick one. Don't expect interest rate decreases to happen quite as quickly, because if inflation is going to be a little bit higher, which is what the Chancellor has said, it's currently down at 2%. She's anticipating it's going to be 2.6 this year. The Bank of England is not going to be decreasing the interest rates too rapidly, folks. So just, sorry, Daniel, I said we had agreed who's going to do what bit, and I hadn't told Daniel I was going to say that. But
no, that's fine. That's fine. Should we move on to like some of the sort of first topics, I guess, in terms of what
let's crack on. Should we do employment
around that? Yeah, so I think employment was the big one, wasn't it? So as we know, that part of the sort of manifesto pledge was quite a strong employment focus over that first 100 days, I think it was, that was quoted. So there was already a lot of information that came out in regards to change to employee rights or lack of rights for employers. I don't know which way you want to frame that. And there's obviously some...
Sorry, Daniel, can I just interrupt you a second? Just got a couple of messages coming in. Jason's asking, is chat disabled? Well, it isn't, because I'm reading the Q&A. So I don't know about the chat box, but the Q&A is open, definitely, Jason. Andy, you're asking, are we on mute? We're not. Hopefully you can hear us all. And messages from others seems to be that they can hear us. Okay. Sorry, Daniel, carry on.
That's all right, no worries. Yeah, so obviously there's some figures that have come out since that's been announced, ignoring anything that's been announced today in terms of what the estimated cost to employers are for some of the changes of rights that have been put in place or that will be coming up. And I think it was estimated at, was it 5 billion? I think it would cost employers, and it would bring in something like 7 million employees under the scope of additional rights, effectively, that fall outside of any sort of those early starting day one rights that have come into action on that, or will be coming into action over the next year or so.
Yeah, I saw the figure of 9 million, actually. 9 million.
Was it 9 million?
Currently on short 0-hour contracts, or they're probationers or something.
Yeah.
Will now be able to claim unfair dismissal from day one. 9 million.
Yeah.
Wow. Don't think the courts could handle that one.
Yeah. So big cost to employers there. And then obviously the headline one that was talked about an awful lot over the last few weeks was the changes around employer national insurance rates. So we saw the rate will be going from 13.8%, which it's currently sat at, up to 15% from April 2025. Obviously, it was sort of muted around that rate might be 2%, but have we got a hidden additional feature within that probably makes up that difference, where we've seen a reduction of the threshold of when employer national insurance becomes payable. So currently, 9,100 before you fall into that rate as an employer of paying employer national insurance on the salary of your team. That is reducing to 5,000 from the start of next year. So we've got a squeeze at the bottom, increase in rate, and possibly it's been softened by the increase to the employer national insurance allowance. So again, lots of you may be aware that as long as you qualify, and there are some qualifying criteria around it, that your first £5,000 worth of employer national insurance would be covered by this allowance. That's set to increase up to 10,500 again from the start of the next financial or next tax year. The other bit that wasn't mentioned within the speech, but sort of come up within some of the detail, is currently, if you've got an employer national insurance bill of in excess of 100,000, you don't qualify for that employer NI allowance. That's been removed, so that threshold's gone. So some people that didn't qualify for it will now qualify for it, but they're facing higher taxes. And I'm pretty sure, just with some very quick numbers that I've done for a couple of people already, you're not going to be better off by having that allowance available to you if you didn't already. But obviously it does soften maybe some of that tax blow. There's another cost to your business, but I'll get to that as like a sort of maybe a separate topic in terms of what will probably have a bigger impact on a lot of our clients, but also, you know, a lot of those sort of small and growing businesses out there. But we'll get to that at a later point. So yeah, headline one, the rate's obviously different to what was speculated, but is it some jiggery pokery in terms of where that number comes from? My guess says yes, probably.
Yeah, it was clever mathematics. Saying 2% would have had a much worse reaction, but to say 1.2, but then lower the threshold for when it starts, probably equates to 2%. We haven't checked the maths, but well done, Daniel, for getting into the 170 pages of the red book already, because you've done better than me. I haven't got that far yet.
Yeah.
And I think everyone here should understand we haven't read the 170 pages of the red book yet. Daniel started. I'll do it tonight. And a lot of the detail will come out later, but sorry, Dan, carry on.
Yeah, no, so that's the one. Say headline one in terms of around business and cost of business from a staffing point of view. I will go on to the next one now, because like I said, I do think it is relevant. You may have seen yesterday increases to the national minimum wages and national living wage, which comes into effect from April again. And I think this actually has a much bigger impact on businesses. And I think from like it's the third or fourth year potentially that we've seen this increase and significant increases in terms of these numbers. So we're seeing, I say, national living wage, that's for effectively 21 and over, increase up to 12.21 per hour. And then we've got the national minimum wage, which relates to 18 to 20-year-olds, going up to £10 per hour. There's also increases to the apprentice and under 18s rate. That also comes into the same effect. Again, I think that goes up to £7.55 per hour from April. Again, big impact. And this is where I know it's something that I bang on a lot about, so I will sound like a broken record with this, is start forecasting now what that means. And it's not just about people that are on national living wage. To businesses, there's bound to be an upward cascade effect of if the base increases, then it's going to have a knock-on effect on that above that as well. So trying to get ahead of what those figures mean now for you and your business in terms of any changes that you might need to make, things that you might need to forecast for, looking at pricing and so on. Like, now is the time to try and crack on with that, so you've got the plan in place ready for when those become effective. Planning is essential.
Dan, I'm going to stop you a moment. Richard Oates has asked a couple of questions relating to the employer's allowance and the marginal threshold. Is on the last two questions were from Richard about that. So I know you've gone off the topic, but perhaps if you could just bounce back to the topic for a moment.
So for employer NI, effectively the threshold. So like with any tax, there's a point at which it becomes payable. So and what we've seen over the last couple of years is those rates used to be quite similar between the time when an employee would start paying national insurance and then the point at which the employer would start paying it. They were quite level. I think it was 2 years ago, we saw a bit more of a disparity within that figure. So when the employee rate kicked in, was more in line with the personal tax allowance for income tax, whilst the employer element stayed at the same rate. So effectively, all it just means is that as soon as somebody over the course of a year earns more than £5,000 effectively, for anything over and above that, as an employer, you'll pay 15%, sorry, we'll correct it, 15% from April on anything above that value. Another thing that's really, really key, and I think sometimes it gets a little bit lost is for employees, there are two rates of national insurance that you'll pay depending on what your level of income is at. And it's a much reduced rate once you go into what traditionally might be seen as like a higher rate tax bracket in terms of income. For employers, they don't have that disparity within that rate. So it's just 15% on however much they earn once they're above those thresholds. In terms of the allowance, effectively, it's a cumulative figure in terms of how a business might use it through the year. So let's say, just for argument's sake, let's say it's been a busy day, so we'll use round numbers. If I've got a monthly bill for my employer national insurance of £5,000 on my staff bill, effectively the first month in my year, so in April, will be fully covered by my allowance that's available to me. And then the next month, when I've got 5,000 again, I'll be used up now under the new rate. But then when I get to the third month, I've only got £500 of the allowance to use up. So I'm going to have a 4.5k bill come the third month of that year. And then after that, my allowance is just gone. There are some differences. And again, it's probably more focused on specifics. So if you've got specific questions that are related to your business, then obviously reach out to us and we can go through that. Where you've got more than one business that has employees, again, they can look at it from an aggregated point of view in terms of what your total bill is. You won't be able to claim the employer allowance in every business if you've got connected businesses. So hopefully, Richard, that explains a little bit more detail around how that allowance works.
Great, thank you for that. You keep going. I'm going to keep looking at the messages and trying to answer the ones I can easily.
No, it's fine. Well, I said my final topic was just around the rate, so I was just going to hand it back over to you, Mark, for your first one.
Okay, fine. Well, I'm going to kick on. Let's talk about some property, because there's an awful lot of property people in the room. I know, Daniel, you're going to talk about CGT generally.
Yeah.
So I'll leave you to deal with that and the increases there. From the property perspective, obviously, the big issue for us, we were all worried about CGT increases. We know we're facing the 24% rate at the moment. That's the top rate on residential property. That's residential property which is owned in your own name, which is not your home. So it's not your principal private residence. You've got to pay CGT on it, and 24% is the top rate. Lo and behold, there was no mention of any increase in that rate. Obviously, all other CGTs now are going to be raised to the same levels that we as property investors are paying, which is 18 and 24. So there was a question asked within the Q&A, and I can't remember who asked it now. It might have been Dom. What was there? What did we not see? Well, we didn't see that. That was quite good news. I like that bit. SDLT. There's the horrible one, isn't it? The property people in the room are not going to appreciate what I'm saying, but just try to stay with me on this. It's quite a clever tax for them to increase, and yes, they have increased it. So for property investors, we can see that the marginal rate has gone up from 3 to 5%, so a 2% increase. Why do I say it's a clever one? As property investors, let's imagine you're going to buy a property and it's currently on the old rules £200,000, and you've done all your maths and the deal works. You've done your deal stacking the way that the clever guys teach you how to do it, and obviously we check your deal stacking if your clients are ours, etc. Great, the deal works, but if the property is now increased by 2%, it's £204,000. The deal doesn't work. Well, you shouldn't have done the deal at 200 then. If it was that marginal that's all an increase damaged your deal, you shouldn't have done it in the first place. So if a property is £200,000, does it work? If a property is 204,000, does it work? And the answer is probably yes. So actually, it's a tax which is a one-off on our purchase. Yes, we're going to get some relief when we sell it, so on our CGT, but it's quite a clever tax to increase. The real problem with the CGT increase, the SDLT increase, sorry, and I assume that this applies to LTT and LBTT for those in Wales and Scotland, but again, I haven't got into the Red Book yet, but I'm fairly sure that the Welsh and Scottish governments will be tagging along on this one, is now the overseas investor. So the expat tax advice clients who are investing in the UK, for example, because this is the non-residents element is a surcharge. So whatever the core rate is now a surcharge on top. So now we're going to see the overseas investors be paying 7%. Now all of a sudden that property was £200,000. We're now up to 214. Wow, that's getting expensive. That's quite a jump now, isn't it? And there was one of the questions, what about the limited company? Again, it's a surcharge. The limited company is a surcharge. It isn't explicitly stated. And actually, if you went on to Gov.uk and started playing with the SDLT calculators presented by the government, they've already put the 5% rate in. That's fine. So they've updated their website. Good. They haven't updated their calculator, though. So at the moment, they haven't explicitly said that it does apply to limited companies. Take it as read, it's going to. So the limited companies have the surcharge as well. So it's not cheaper to buy it in a limited company than it is in your private names for a second property. So limited companies and investors in their own name will be paying increased stamp duty. The one that I was surprised not to see, and again, I haven't read the red book yet, so I'm still got to read the red book, so bear with me. The SDLT relief for the first-time buyers. Now, as entrepreneurs, does it matter to us? We're not first-time buyers. Yeah, we do need those guys buying the properties at the cheaper end of the market. You know, the new buyers, usually they're the cheaper end of the market because they're releasing property for us as well. So that's quite nice, you know, to see the market moving. And at the moment, there is a discount for the first-time buyers. I didn't see an extension to the time limit for the first-time buyers. I'll have to look for that. I'm not saying it isn't there. I've got to look for it and try and find that. And staying on the property part, I just want to do one quick one. I am massively worried. I worry about it every year. Daniel and I talk about it all the time. And if any of you know Jenny in our company, Jenny Silver, brilliant. She looks after something called ATED. ATED, annual tax and envelope dwellings. What does that mean? Properties, investment properties purchased in an investment company. And you're meant to be doing ATED returns on any properties which are valued at £500,000 and they're valued and they're revalued every 3 years. So few people ever speak to us about ATED. I would love the investors present to actually jump on our website and go and look at that, or talk to us if you're clients of ours, just so we can talk you through it and make sure you're not going to get the fines. There isn't a tax to pay for our investor clients, but there are fines if you don't say there isn't a tax to pay. Great question from Ruth. Increase in SDLT kicks in from tomorrow. Yep. What is the situation if you've already exchanged but not completed? I think that's a great question. Love to know what the answer was. Okay, let me tell you what I think the answer is. The trigger point for the liability, if you've already exchanged, the trigger point has happened. You've exchanged. The completion is when you're making the payments and you're actually handing over the goods. But the exchange is the contract. So I think the SDLT applies on the exchange date, not the completion date. Oh, and Sally's answered for me. Thank you very much, Sally, but can't let me answer. Can I?
That would always also be, like, because I know there's a query that came up from somebody else. Obviously, the situation might change depending on what the type of transaction is.
Sure.
If there's any conditions and stuff attached.
If there's an EDC in exchange for delay completion, yep, that's going to affect it. PLOs, etc. There was a question in, so it's just disappeared already. Alex seems to be asking 1,000 questions at a time.
I think from these ones from earlier, but I think you might have answered them. So aside from the SDLT increase,
Roger's asked about LTDs not having to pay CGT. Absolutely true. When you do your company tax return, actually the page is called a CGT return, but you're not paying CGT, you're paying corporation tax. What's the rates of corporation tax? Somewhere between 20 and 25 based upon your marginal rates. So are you better off in a company compared to own name? Unlikely to be so, Roger, in respect of CGT. So I just answered that one live, so I did. So what do I think there's a question asked, what do I think the effect on the property market will be as a result of the budget? The market is really suppressed at the moment. Lots of people are sitting on their hands. I've got lots of clients who are saying to me they're not going to make any decisions yet. They want to meet the budget and then talk to me afterwards. That's absolutely fine and quite normal. So there's lots of people sitting on their hands. So the market's a little bit suppressed right now. Is there a shock factor with regard to the SDLT? Of course there is. People always have a shock factor. Will you get over it? Yes, you will, I think. It's 2%, an increase in property price from 200 to 204. Property prices increase. That's why we get involved in property. I think if the first-time buyers are not going to get their relief, I think that will cause a shock in the market. Otherwise, no, I'm not seeing a dramatic. I'm not anticipating a dramatic change in the market. I think it's a real shame that the government has adopted this attitude towards the non-residents. Personally, the world is very small nowadays, so I'm not anticipating any significant long-term effects on the market. I just think we're business people, we get on with it. Is that enough on property for now, Daniel? Do you want to go back to yours?
Yeah, just obviously just to go through just some of these ones that are still live in the chat. So yeah. I was anything surprised that we didn't see. My response to most clients on the lead up to this has been don't plan on speculation. So I'm never surprised or unsurprised in terms of what's there. We can't do too much about it. Obviously, in terms of inflation predictions and so on, I think to a certain extent they are what they are. As Mark mentioned earlier, obviously there's an impact, and you can certainly see it from some of the information that's been published since the speech this afternoon, where we see a big spike in activity because of all of these good things that have been announced and that's going to happen and stimulate growth, and then we see this flattening off towards the end. So I'd always take some of those predictions with a slight pinch of salt personally, but yeah. I am very cynical, so I do apologise for that on regular occasions. So just following on from Mark's
cynical point, and I'm miserable. Yeah.
So just following on from Mark's point around CGT. So obviously capital gains tax. So we're going to see a change to those rates from the 10. So this is non-property related stuff. From 10 and 20 up to 18 and 24. As many of you are aware, and I'm sure if you've had interactions with anything capital gains tax related, we've seen quite heavy reductions in regards to the annual exempt amounts, the tax-free amount of gain that you can make. Again, I believe that's just going to be captured by the continued freeze on allowances. So that's still set at £3,000 worth of tax-free gain, which doesn't go very far for a lot of people in terms of what they're doing. I guess the main topic, and again, it was one that was really heavily speculated about pre-budget, was around what's referred to as business asset disposal relief. So people might be aware of it previously as entrepreneurs relief. Again, it's a relief that we've seen really, really heavy reductions to the allowances that were available. So effectively what it covers off is a lifetime limit of gains that fall under this scope of the relief. And those used to be at £10 million worth of gains. It's now only over
back in the good old days.
Yeah, it's only £1 million worth of gains that sort of get captured by this. And currently, the rate that applies on those gains that fall in that sort of 0 to $1 million bracket work on a 10% tax rate. But it was announced today that we will see an increase to that rate over a 2-year period, effectively staggered. So that rate is going to go from 10, and then in 2025, it's going to go to 14%, and then 2026 up to 18%. So it's going to be bringing you in line, say with that now the main rate of capital gains tax that would be payable. So we've seen a lot of activity, and I'm sure if people have been involved with insolvency or solvent liquidations, we always see a lot of activity pre-budget in terms of people taking the opportunity to try and get ahead of a change. This isn't a good change for entrepreneurs because of it's, again, an increase in tax, and we should be encouraging people to grow businesses, and create jobs effectively that comes with growing businesses. What this does give us is it gives us some time scale in terms of knowing what those rates might be at. So we've got something to plan for or plan against. So again, like from my perspective, I think it's very much around the case of going, if we know that I'm going to have an increase in tax rate that I'd otherwise have paid on that exit today, what do I need to do to be adding more value into my business, and can I be doing some of those actions? I think it's a very common thing, and we certainly see it a lot over the years. I've seen it a lot where owner-managed businesses do think that their company is their pension. They all think it's going to be worth X amount, but actually it's a really, really planned step out in terms of then what you can do to try and increase that value in. So not good news, but again, I would focus it in terms of what can you be doing to really get that value into your business if exit is part of what it is that you're looking to do long term.
It's quite an interesting one, because you asked the question, is the big ADR going to be cancelled?
Yeah.
Well, that was all the scuttlebutt. Was it going to be cancelled? And what we've seen is in the next 2 years, no, it's not going to be cancelled. We're just going to remove the tax saving. So there is a saving between 18 and 24.
Yeah, this
is what they're going to do in April 27.
Yeah,
because she's only told us 2 years. So I agree with you. We've got some time frame. Yeah. We've only got the 2 years of time frame.
Yeah,
she was talking constantly about 2930. She was constantly talking about 2930. But when you get to this, when you went 2 years, why? Well, I'm a skeptic. Mm-hmm. If you're only going to tell me what you're going to do for 2 years, that means you've left the door open that you will cancel BADR, effectively cancel it, because you're going to move the 18 to 18 or 24, whatever your normal rate is. So an effective cancel, yeah, I think is on the cards. I think it's coming. It's been abused lots of times. So I think it's coming, but yeah. But there again, that's just because I'm a skeptic.
Cool. Next one for you then, Mark.
Okay. I was going to quickly jump on to something for the expats. Sorry, there was a question from Paul Boyce, which I was typing an answer to, but I'll talk about it, which is, are there any grants and incentives for investments? No. No. This is a government that taxes and then spends your money. They're not giving you incentives. They're just taking 40 million quid off of us, 40 billion quid off of us. VCTs and EIS are still there, but realistically, there's not many of the micro and small businesses will be using VCT and EIS. I'm not aware of any other grants that were suddenly available. I don't think the government...
I would say just to do with the EIS VCT piece, yeah, like from our typical client base, obviously those types of investments, and we don't advise on the investment. We've got some great contacts that can deal with that aspect.
Yep.
They are a good tax planning tool. If you're prepared that there is some risk that's attached to those, they are a tax incentive in terms of the relief that you can get personally for making investments into EIS qualifying, VCT qualifying investments. So there's always something to have. They said, I think the current scheme in place is 2035, I think it was, that they said in terms of in its current form, obviously again, subject to any change. But it's something that's worth considering, because I say from a personal tax planning point of view, I certainly see clients that want that to be part of what they're doing, say alongside their advisors, is pretty useful. In terms of other incentives, and again, this is probably jumping into one here, R&D.
Go on then, you do that one.
Yeah, no, I think research and development tax credit. So R&D got thrown around a lot today, like in terms of money we're going to be putting into this and money we're going to be putting into that, and innovation and R&D and R&D and R&D. All of it was very much focused on giving money to big business to do something. That's what I took. That's what I took from what was being said. And I think that's a really important point, because of, again, if you've been keeping up to date with posts that we've put out, topical things that have been happening, R&D tax credits has really, really come under the radar at the moment. in, again, what would be our typical client base in terms of that small, medium-sized growing business. And it's been a really, really valuable tax credit that's been available. Some of the compliance activity around it has got tighter. I think it was 18 months ago, 2 years ago, they reduced some of the reliefs that were attached to it in terms of part of I'll call it, I think they refer to it as simplification, but I don't think it actually made things any simpler for people. And it brought, I say, extra scrutiny from HMRC. Very recently, there's been some high profile, won't mention names, etc., but high profile stuff around fraudulent activity within the R&D arena. And there's been some really scary graphs posted of the level of claims and value of claims that have been made over time, which has brought the spotlight onto this particular area of tax. And what tends to happen, so when somebody does something wrong, the assumption is that everybody must be wrong from a tax point of view. So the compliance activity that we've seen within the R&D area has increased dramatically. Really, really big, in terms of what people, scrutiny over what good things that people are doing in small businesses. And it's come from misdemeanors within so-called proclaimed tax professionals, which aren't probably very professional, which again is another thing that there is a bit of focus on within the information that's sort of come out around.
We'll talk about the LLPs in a minute, yeah.
So the relief is great. That is an incentive that's there, but my God, are they making you sweat for it? I say as a small, medium-sized business. So that incentive doesn't feel that incentivized because of, either they're going to bounce it back or there's going to be a hell of a lot more scrutiny within that area. So it's a possible one, but one that's becoming less attractive when it should be more attractive, I think.
Yeah. I'm going to break the pattern. There was a question that Richard asked, which I said I was going to talk about it and I didn't. So can I quickly deal with that one? It's back to property for a moment. Yeah. And it's about business rates. There was a 75% relief extension. There was a 75% relief given to business rates for small businesses. Okay. And it was only a 1 year relief and it was meant to end. That doesn't mean to say it was going to end, because obviously these things are bounced along, etc. And lo and behold, the Chancellor comes along and says, rather than you losing your 75% relief, well, who the hell said we're going to lose it anyway? I'm going to keep it, but I'm going to reduce it to 40% relief. So what does that really mean? Well, actually, your business rates on your properties are now going to double. All right. So you had a 75% relief, you're going to get 40%. It's almost doubling. And is that permanent? No, it's not permanent. It's still just an extension, but it's an extension at 40% rather than extension at 75%. So it sounds like a good thing, but actually it was not such a good thing. It was just another way of taking tax. But yeah. Good question from Tim. Perhaps VCT should be a mainstream investments, can be a good investment, let alone 30% income tax relief. Of course, very nice that the IFA that looks after me personally made that comment. Thank you, Tim. And if you need a good IFA, we'll introduce you. I have read Daphne's on. I'm going to carry on with something else, and Daniel will read Daphne's.
Yeah.
I want to deal with something for the non-residents, please, if I may. The abolition of the non-dom regulations with effect of April 25. Everyone goes, well, it doesn't affect me, I'm okay. Yeah, okay, but it's an awful lot of money not being brought into our country. Anyway, the government's going to raise £12.7 billion over a 5-year period by hurting our non-residents again. I really don't understand what the logic is of, perhaps I do. You don't vote Labour because you're a non-resident, you can't vote, so you don't need to be coddled by the government. So we're going to abolish the non-dom rules. What's more interesting to me, I think, is they've announced that there's going to be some new residency rules for those who are coming here to work temporarily. Just in case you're not aware, If you're a tax resident, then there's definition of how you become a tax resident. And if you're not sure about that, you need to engage with us at Expat Tax Advice. You get taxed on your worldwide earnings for the whole year in which you are a tax resident, unless you're a split year treatment, blah, blah, blah. So there's going to be some new residency rules. Well, the last time they changed the residency rules, they were so bureaucratic. Yes, it did remove the grey areas, which accountants do like grey areas because we dance in there. But it's so bureaucratic. So we have got to change to the residency rules coming up. Obviously, if you're affected, you're interested, reach out to your consultant at Expat Tax Advice and they will be assisting you. That might well be me because it's one of my areas. I've already talked about the non-residents for the stamp duty. That's about it for the non-residents. So out of the money they're raising, yes, the non-residents are contributing a lot. For those of you that worry about these things, the visitors to our country not paying VAT, what damage has that done into our major cities by removing that from the non-residents a few years ago? Huge amount. Really damaged a lot of our retail industries into the leisure markets. Manchester, Liverpool, Birmingham, London. They've really been hurt by that. So I don't know why successive governments are so negative about people who are coming into our country with a shed load of cash in their pockets. But anyway, that's what they're doing. Tony, no, I don't know what the changes to the non-dom residency rules. Yeah, they're abolishing them. They're abolishing the non-doms with effect of April 25. The whole thing about non-doms disappears April 25. So what we don't know is what they're changing as well. And Tony's asking, talk about the residency. No, they haven't told us yet. They just told us they're going to change it. I don't know what it is yet.
Yeah, so it's consultation effectively, isn't it, at this stage?
Yeah, it's typical that they announce these things and add up the numbers and take account of the numbers and say, we've raised all this money, but they haven't told us what the rules are yet. Mm-hmm. So that'll come out in the months ahead. So I expect to be knowing about that around December, January time.
Yeah, and then just to touch on Daphne's question around private pensions. Yeah, I think pensions were the one that was highly sort of speculated over the last few months. So there might be some changes. Doesn't appear to be. 25% tax-free lump sum still applies. Do remember though that even though they abolished the lifetime allowance, so there is the cap on what that 25% is. It doesn't become 25% at some point. I haven't got the figures in front of me, but I say just be aware of that. The IHT part of it, changed from April 2027 with regards to a lot of pensions fell into exempt from IHT. They're now going to be brought under the scope of that from April 27. Details in terms of around like cutoff and stuff, Daphne. Yeah, I don't have that detail. But as soon as we do, then obviously we will share that out to be able to sort that bit as well.
Great. Casey's asked a question about the non-doms. Does it mean we'll no longer be able to choose the rising or remittance? Yeah, if the non-doms as a whole concept, non-dom is just disappearing. We don't know what it's replaced with though. So we don't know how long a person's in the country before they have to pay tax on their worldwide income. Will that therefore encourage people to stay outside the country, but maybe invest in the country because it's a good place to make money? That's what it does mean, Casey. Okay, I'm going to go on, if I may, Daniel, to IR35 type issues, but do you want me to do that now? Or?
Yeah.
Okay. Again, another topic, IR35, there'll be, property people won't be interested, but never mind, stick with it. It's important because the people that loan you money are affected. Okay. IR35 is the catch-all piece of legislation that the government had about trying to stop you becoming self-employed through your own company. So a person leaves their desk on a Friday, goes and as an employee and goes back to that same desk and that same computer and that same login on Monday, but they're now called a limited company. That was what IR35 was all about. It's been going for a long time, since 1997. Has the government got it right yet? No. Are there huge problems? There's huge problems applying it. There's huge problems on how we deal with it. How the government tried to deal with IR35 was, and this is relevant, so stay with me, please. How they tried to deal with it is they said, look, every time we try to attack the taxpayer, so the guy that left his desk and returned to his desk on Monday morning, every time we attack him, we lose because his accountants come in and defeat us. So we won't attack him anymore. We're going to attack the guy that pays him instead. So we're going to attack the client. The automatic reaction on the clients, this was a few years ago now, the automatic reaction of the clients was, you can't work for us as a limited company, you've got to go away. We don't have limited companies working directly for us. What you should do, says the government, is go to an umbrella company. An umbrella company, so your limited company now works for an umbrella limited company. The umbrella limited company now looks after you and through an agent puts you into your end client. So that it was a license to print money for the umbrella companies. I don't know if any of that made sense to the non-IR35 people, but the contractors will understand what I've just said. Yeah, the umbrella companies are now being attacked. The amount of cases that we are seeing and the amount of spotlights on umbrella companies now having stop notices put against them. You cannot continue to trade, you are doing things in a naughty fashion, is huge. So what the government has now announced today is, well, we created this monster called umbrella, and we don't like it. So if the umbrella does anything wrong, we're going to blame the agent. So remember this sequence, got the client, then the agent, the umbrella, and then the self-employed operator through his limited company, 4 people in the chain. So they introduced this umbrella in because they didn't want to deal with the end chap. Now they're attacking the umbrella and they're making that the agent's problem. IR35, the law has not changed on IR35. It is still subject to the ready-mix concrete case rules. Please come and talk to us at IR35. We will advise you. If you're involved with umbrellas, recognize the umbrellas are in danger now. So either you're a contractor that uses, you're a client that uses contractors, or a contractor that works through an umbrella, please come and talk to us because you've got problems coming.
It's quite interesting because it's a common approach from HMRC in terms of like if I don't think I'm getting the right amount of tax from somebody, I'll go and ask for it from somebody else.
Yep.
Because we saw that a little bit. I think that's why it sort of came in with the reverse charge in the construction industry.
Absolutely.
Push it out the chain to the biggest person. I've only got to chase one person, and they might be doing it right because they're big. Like that was sort of the approach to it, I think.
Yeah.
Cool. Question just popped up in the chat. So CGT on shares, how has that changed in simple terms? So shares that you own in a big corporate, BT of the world, Vodafone, somebody like that, your rate's going to go up on those from the start of the next tax year if you dispose of them. If it's your own shares in your own business and you've held them for more than 2 years, more than 5% of the voting rights, etc., you'll still qualify for business asset disposal relief, but that rate will go up as well over the next 2 years. So yeah, simple terms is your tax on those will go up.
Yep. So the answer, Benjamin, is you either stay and make the business bigger, or you've got small tax bills coming.
Yeah.
Okay. Employment rights, I think you've done, Daniel. I want to talk about the employer and the worker and the self-employed, which I should have done with the IR35. Can I quickly finish that one?
Yeah.
And then I'll let you round off the presentation. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Okay. I've just done all that super complicated thing about end clients and agents and sorry, it's going to get worse now. Employment legislation. We've seen the employment legislation change. And wrapped up in that is a change that's coming, and it will affect the IR35 contractors, but it affects you if you engage contractors in any form. Okay, so we used to have an environment where you were either self-employed or employed, and that was the employment rights. You were either an employee, in which case you had a certain amount of rights, or you're self-employed. You didn't have any rights really at all other than contract rights. Okay. So the government changed that years ago now, and they effectively, it always feels to me like a sliding scale going downwards. I don't know why my hand went up, but it's going downwards. And they introduced a thing in the middle called worker. Are you a worker? So you've got an employer, an employee, and a worker, and self-employed. And the employee had more rights, the worker had some rights, the self-employed had almost no rights. Okay. Those are the same sort of rules as we just saw in IR35. So if anyone's ever confused as to why, as a firm, Daniel, Steve, Shannon, me, have created all of these different entities and all of these different expert teams within the firm, it's because they all interconnect. Okay. So the IR35 team are dealing with that one, because actually with the employment rights are now trying to give the worker the same rights as the employee. So if you're self-employed, you've got some rights. So effectively, the government's pushing us all towards being employees. That's the general trend of things.
And we know why. One simple answer: tax goes up, isn't it?
It's called employers' national insurance and employees' national insurance. So, you know, we're 15% of employers' national insurance and employees' national insurance at whatever rate it is. I can't remember now. What is the rate of it? 8%. Great. 23% of every pound that's paid to you as an employee, 23 pence of that has to be paid to the government as a tax on your job. So if they can push more people towards being employees by changing all the rights, and you can't actually, you're beginning not to tell the difference now between employees and workers. They push them. Now they're starting to push the self-employed, and IR35 is all about that as well. Okay. Think of that graph, think of that image I've just tried to demonstrate with my hands, and then you'll understand the graph which we're putting out and the graphics for that, because I'll be explaining that in a posting on all the social media and the website, etc. Okay, there's lots of changes coming there. They're absolutely silent on IR35 at the moment. Why? I don't think I don't think this government could ever conceive of itself as being business friendly. Does anyone think they're business friendly after today? So there was nothing said about IR35, but I think I can see the direction of travel. That will help you. In the meantime, yes, they have dealt with umbrellas, which is all part of that same mechanism of trying to force everyone to become employees.
Obviously, and umbrellas were mentioned somewhere else within the speech as part of that, which was the focus around, I think it's now terminology is modernising HMRC.
Yes.
So what did that mean? So it was already announced I think it was probably a couple of months ago, an additional 5,000 staff, I think it is, that's been focused on compliance activity and debt management. I think were the two terms used for them.
Yeah.
So a focus on umbrellas, a focus on promoters of tax avoidance. So I know Mark mentioned it, but to specifically mention it around it, if you search HMRC Spotlight,
yes,
I have a series of Spotlight. I think they're on 65, I think it is at the moment.
Well, 65. 62 was interesting for the property people, so was 63.
Yeah, 63, yeah. So you've got that. So you go and have a look at that, because again, this is where they're sort of going, well, these are the people that we want to go and have a look at, and sort of giving some detail around it. So the umbrellas were mentioned. And then also it was mentioned around that we will be seeing an increase in the interest rate that's charged on overdue tax from April.
Mm-hmm.
And all of this is focused on trying to raise 6.5 billion to try and close what's referred to as the tax gap.
Yeah.
So a bit like R&D, a bit like IR35, I'm sure a bit like every other tax. I think it's pretty much a slam dunk given that the level of compliance activity will increase.
Yeah.
I said, we've certainly, I think it took a little bit longer than what we anticipated it to post-COVID for it to increase, because this has been a little bit of an investment focus and so on. But certainly over, I would say, the last 12 to 18 months, you can see the impact of what we've been doing over, I say, with this investment, we'll call it, into closing this tax gap. So just be aware that I think more people, right, wrong, otherwise will get pulled into some compliance activity to make it harder.
There's a quick point I just want to quickly add to that. Apps 100% agree, of course, with Daniel. We can see it. It's happening all the time. If your clients of ours, we offered you fee protection. If you didn't take it, silly. And if you're not clients of ours, make sure your accountants are offering you fee protection, because you need it. They can just hunt on anything now. So just watch it. There is an extra compliance. Last one I wanted to raise, Daniel, if I may. Isn't it interesting? We've seen it over decades. Whenever you've got a big thing being announced, like a budget, what else has been announced today? So what other publications have been made today? So Daniel and I were just musing about what else we could see coming out. So there was a nice one about LLPs. So again, property clients, Karen asking about, I'll talk about fee protection in a second. LLPs. There was one of these schemes. It's been closed down of, don't worry, we can move you from investments in your own name to investments into an LLP to investments in a limited company by the dissolution of the limited company into a limited company, limited liability partnership into a limited company. And yeah, we're having to deal with the fallout of that by advising that other accountants, firm, I don't know if they're accountants or not. So there was legislation come out on that today. That was interesting. See that coming out. There was legislation out today upon the loan scheme. That was another scheme that other accountants had invented, and that didn't work, and that's hurt people as well. So we're seeing a lot of legislation coming out. So there'll be a lot for us to talk about in the coming days.
Should we add a fun one, just in case anybody is worried about the tax increases? They are improving and strengthening, was the word, HMRC scheme for rewarding informants.
Yeah, paying more
to money to get paid by the government.
If you want to fess up somebody and you to the HMRC, you'll get paid better.
Yeah,
how about that? It's great fun, isn't it?
There's funny things that they sit through. Equally, there's been, I know I've seen a lot of it, obviously, in terms of businesses looking at succession planning as well. Yeah. So obviously one of the bits with I say the CDT potentially going up on that exit are people are looking at things like the employee benefit trust and employee ownership trust and so on, which are a great way, if used properly. They can be a really efficient way for owners to exit out of it through almost the equivalent of like a management buyout type thing. Today they've launched some changes to that to try and tighten up that area. So you can see that obviously when tax changes somewhere else, people will naturally try and navigate to something else that hopefully would mean less tax. Obviously, again, like we see with, say, the R&D and other things, it's also been open to abuse around stuff, and therefore there is a focus on that. So that's come into effect from today. Some of those changes that will come through on that, and again, I'm sure we'll write a little bit more about that over the next week or so.
Well, the telling part for that is, everyone, please be careful, which comes back to Karen's question. What do you mean by fee protection? Okay, so nice, simple question. Accountants are not insurance brokers. We cannot sell you insurance. If you had a tax inquiry, even if you're completely innocent, for us to try to prove to the taxman you're innocent is going to cost you thousands of pounds. All right, so you're innocent, but to prove you're innocent, it's going to cost you thousands of pounds. You have to pay that bill. And you can't claim tax relief on the money you paid to prove you're innocent, because if you shouldn't have had an inquiry in the first place. What we do is, as a firm, we buy insurance and we name you on our policy. Lovely question, Sally. Sorry, I'll share that one in a minute because it's a good. well, made me laugh. So back to Karen. So basically, we buy insurance and we name a client on our insurance policy that says, "Hey, we are buying policy, and we will protect Karen in the event that there's a tax inquiry, and you will pay us to do so, Mr. Insurance Company." And they say, "Certainly." So you pay a small fee. It's 150 quid a year, 200 quid a year, something like that. And that isn't tax deductible either, because you shouldn't have needed fee protection if you didn't have a risk of a tax inquiry. Better to not have tax relief on 200 quid than it is on £5,000. Go on, Dan, you can deal with Sally.
Yeah, yeah. Well, this is good. Does income coming from grassing someone up mean you're a worker or a non-worker? Sally, like it.
Oh, well done, Sally. What a great sense of humour. Yeah, I love the idea that I'm sitting here at 5 o'clock. I've been doing this all day with Daniel, prepping everything. We're going to be working into the evening. And hey, neither Dan nor I are workers. How about that? We're not workers. It's really good. I didn't.
You know what will soften the blow of that?
Yeah.
Your draft pint might be cheaper.
My draft pint of beer might be 1 pence cheaper.
So enjoy that beer tonight, everybody.
Thank you for the 26 questions. It was nice to have this interactive and have you engaging with us. So thank you very much. I think we're getting towards the end, Daniel.
Yeah, can I just one last thing for me, and it's just this is going. If you've attended our webinars before, you'll know that we've mentioned this quite a lot over the last few, which is around the freezing of the thresholds. They said, and they've sort of dangled a carrot as if that they were going to do it to 2030, but they're only going to do it in line with what was already announced in terms of 2028. Those freezing of personal allowance, income tax bands, etc., creates what is referred to as fiscal drag. So all of these other changes that are pushing people up the tax rates, making people, I say, jump up through it, is going to result in more tax being paid by people because of those freezing of those rates. So I think it's a really important one to mention, and a reminder. So if you've been before, you'd have heard us say it, but say for those that haven't, that is a proper thing that generates a hell of a lot of tax revenue by not doing anything effectively. Is the root.
Well, the government is nasty and sneaky. When they took away the pension, my thought process was the freezing of the allowance. Look after your parents, will you, people? Because all of a sudden your parents who are getting state pension will be dragged into having to do self-assessment returns, right? Because the freezing of the allowance and the triple lock on the pension, so the pension is going to go up and the allowance isn't, and it's going to pass it, and your parents will be paying tax on their state pensions shortly. Please look after your parents. When they froze the fuel allowance for the pensioners, the amount they saved from doing that was actually more money than they were paying to the pensioners with the increase in the pension, apparently. I don't know how the mathematics of that worked, because one was about 300 quid a year, one was about 400 quid a year, but
just a question come up from Tony. Will you let everyone know the residency rules when they come out? Yeah, of course we will.
Tony, obviously you're a good client and good friend of this company. You and I talk quite frequently, don't we, mate? As soon as I know, you will know.
Yeah, one of the things, and obviously we're getting close to wrapping this up. Obviously, thanks for let's say, as Mark said, being interactive with it. We are always looking for feedback on doing these things. So if there are topics that you want specifically covered off that are just focused on those bits, then do let us know. I think there is like a very little small 5-question survey thing that will pop up at the end of this, where if you can fill that in and tell us if there's information around it. I say we will be continuing to post. So if you're not connected to us on like our social channels, we'll have obviously emails coming out to clients around things. We're trying to regularly post videos onto like our YouTube page, which this will be available on. So some of you might be watching that on now over the sort of coming days. But yeah, that feedback to us is really, really important, because it just helps to make sure that we tailor our information to our clients' needs to make sure that those questions are answered. And obviously then if it's useful to other people, like feel free to share the stuff out as well, because of, again, that helps us get the message across that we want to help you, we want to help businesses, we want to help entrepreneurs, we want to help people to grow and be better businesses.
Great.
Have you got anything else to add, Mark? I think I'm done on my list of things.
I'm looking for my pint of beer.
Yeah, yeah. Enjoy it. Don't spend that penny all at once. I don't think you get penny sweet anymore either. Right, so
a good answer, Gary. Well done. Yes, please tell Matt.
So thanks everybody again for joining us today. I say do look out for the little survey thing. Do feedback to us. Really appreciate you attending. And I say look out for the information as we digest this further over the coming days and weeks.
Thank you. Thanks, Daphne. Thanks, Sally. Cheers. Bye.